Hey friends, welcome back to the YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Oleg, and this is one and only Mr. Bond. A few months ago, I made this video talking about how Rolex is not releasing any new models in 2020. That was the industry news. Fast forward to today, and Rolex released a bunch of new models and changed up some of their existing models. So what the hell, man? Didn't you watch my video? You're not following the instructions at all. So I guess the only thing left for me to do now is to react to these new models. I did get a lot of messages, people asking for my reaction, so here it is. This will be my reaction to these new models. The first one is the 31mm Rolex Datejust. Nobody cares, like get out of here. 31mm Rolex Datejust, some cosmetic changes. No one cares about those. Next one, the new Sky Dweller, or the new Sky Dweller. They just put a precious metal Sky Dweller on the rubber strap and charge you 35 grand for it. I think 40,000. Again, we don't really care about this watch, do we? I mean, if you really wanted your Sky Dweller on a rubber strap, you could just put your Sky Dweller on a rubber strap. Isn't that right, Bond? Then the next release is actually a little bit more exciting. Oyster Perpetual in 36 and 41mm. So let's start with the 36mm version. It just has a whole bunch of different dial variations now. They look pretty good. Of course, it also has the new updated movement, the 3230 Rolex movement, 90% new parts, but we knew this update was coming. It just made sense for them to update the movement since they already developed the movement. They already put this movement in Rolex Datejust models, so it made sense for them to update the movement. We're not going to talk about the movement update all that much, but we are going to talk about the dials update, because I think what they're trying to do here, they're trying to capture more of that female demographic. I think Rolex realized that a lot of women are buying larger watches now. They're buying that 36mm watch that used to be unisex and still is unisex. Actually, I own a vintage 36mm Datejust and I love that watch. So it's not a female size, it is a unisex size. But I think Rolex saw more and more women gravitate towards that size and they weren't able to offer that many different color options. So that's why they added all these different color options, which is pretty cool. Some of them are more female friendly than others, but overall, nice welcomed refreshment to these dials. Now, the 41mm Oyster Perpetual is even more interesting for me because now they're kind of competing with their own models. So it used to be if you wanted a dress Rolex, but that also looks kind of sporty, you had the choice of either going with something like a Rolex Datejust or going with the Oyster Perpetual. You had the 36mm Datejust. You also had the 41mm Datejust and the 39mm Oyster Perpetual. So it was kind of in the middle. It wasn't quite as small as 36, but it wasn't as large as 41. You had that option. Now they completely took that model out, and Oyster Perpetual is only available in 41mm. So they're kind of competing with the Rolex Datejust models. I don't know why they did this move. I guess they're trying to keep up with the trend of watches getting larger, although I think Rolex now is kind of missing the point. Feels like the watches are getting smaller again, so they're just a few years late for this trend, but that seems to be the theme. A little bit larger watch. It also is available in a few different color combinations, and overall I really like the look of this one. I like that champagne silver dial with the double hashes for 3, 6, and 9. I think that looks pretty good, quite attractive, and it's the cheapest or one of the cheapest Rolex watches that you can get into, and now it just became a little bit more attractive and larger. What I'm gonna say is good luck getting one. Besides the fact that this model actually looks pretty good, I'm also excited to see what happens in the future. Are they gonna change more of their iconic models into larger sizes? Like for example, the Explorer in 39mm, are they going to bump that up to 40 or maybe even 41mm like they did with Oyster Perpetual? I guess time will tell. I really hope they don't do that, but if history taught us anything, is that Rolex is so unpredictable they can just do whatever the hell they want. Which brings us to the next release, the 41mm Submariner. The balls on these guys, huh? Submariner almost became like its own company. Of course, it's the most iconic Rolex watch. You associate Submariner with Rolex. But Submariner is just so much more than just Rolex. It's this iconic diver. Everybody knows what it looks like. Everybody seems to have one, but nobody can buy one. That's a paradox of a Submariner. It's this iconic watch that was always in 40mm. And guess what? Now it's 41mm. 1mm change in diameter is nothing. It's really not perceivable. And actually there are some videos and pictures online already of the two watches side by side, the 40mm Rolex Submariner and the 41mm Rolex Submariner, and actually they look pretty much the same size. Even the 41mm Rolex Submariner looks a little bit smaller. The lugs taper in, so to speak. It has a slimmer profile on the sides, and it does appear smaller on the wrist. So really this change, it's more of on the paper change than a real change that you will be able to see and tell. And that's just me talking without seeing the watch actually in person. From what I've seen and from what I've read online, that seems to be the general idea. The change in that 1mm is not a big change. It's more of what the watch used to represent and what it is now. It's kind of the new era for Rolex, the 2020 Rolex, the larger Rolex. And not surprisingly, a lot of watch collectors are upset about this change. There is even a hotline about that 1mm change. It's 1-800-1mm-CRY. I'm kidding, don't call this number, I don't know what it is. Besides the case getting supersized, the watch also has the new movement. If you have the date one, it has the caliber 32-35 automatic movement. If you have the no date, then it has the caliber 32-30 automatic movement. Again, this change here is not really surprising. Of course, they're going to update the movement. They already have the movement. Now, the other change that is, again, not really surprising, a lot of people saw this coming. Hulk is discontinued, and the Smurf is discontinued. So the Hulk is of course green bezel, green dial version of Submariner in oyster steel, and Smurf is the blue bezel, blue dial version in white gold. So both of these watches are discontinued now, and they are replaced with the old Kermit. So the watch that got discontinued, I think in 2012 or 2010. So that's the black dial green bezel version. Now it comes with the ceramic green dial. Actually looks quite attractive. And also the Smurf got replaced with this other variation, doesn't have a name yet, the blue bezel and black dial version. And again, looks attractive enough. Honestly, Smurf looks better. The blue dial, blue bezel looks great, but it's very similar to the Tudor Black Bay 58 in blue or navy blue. So I think maybe that's why they wanted to change it up. The Hulk getting discontinued is the big one. Smurf really, I mean, it kind of sucks, but whatever. So what I think will happen, I think they will reintroduce these models in a few years. Of course, they discontinue models, then a few years later they introduce them, acting like it's a brand new model where it's really just the model that they discontinued earlier. So yeah, don't be surprised if the Hulk comes back. But for now, if you have a Hulk, first of all, where and how did you buy it? And secondly, congratulations, Rolex just gave you a pretty nice payday. What I anticipate happening is that all the discontinued models, the Hulk and the Smurf, are of course going to go up in price. That's just inevitable. But also, I think the 40mm version is going to go up in price because people now can't buy it new anymore, and people want what they can't have anymore. And especially if this trend with 41mm case continues, people will want the 40mm more and more. So why did they do it? They had a good thing going. Why the hell would they go with the 41mm Submariner now? I think it's because they needed to refresh the line. There's not that many things they could have done to really bring attention to this watch. Yeah, if they slimmed down the case a little bit, if they replaced the movement, if they discontinued Hulk, they brought the Kermit back, all these things would generate some attention to them. But really, changing the case size, now everyone's talking about it. Everyone has an opinion, whether it's good or bad. Everyone is now paying attention. Not everyone, but everyone in the watch industry, you know what I mean. So that's really generating a lot of hype and a lot of conversation for them, which is good for business. Also, maybe in 5 years, if this doesn't work out, if people are really not buying Submariner, which I really doubt, but if the market speaks for itself and people don't want to buy the 41mm Submariner, guess what? 40mm is going to come back. Nothing is permanent, everything's going to change and evolve, so that's just another way for them to make more money. In a few years, guess what? 40mm is back. Yay! Everybody's happy, everybody is buying and loving Rolex again. I'm not saying that will happen, but it could happen. Nothing is off the table. So overall, my or our reaction to this new release is exactly this. It's kind of like, yeah, okay, they did it. I mean, sucks about Hulk being discontinued, but other than that, yeah, the 41mm case, to me personally, doesn't make any difference, whatever. The 41mm Oyster Perpetual is the more interesting watch to me. I'd love to see one in person. I want to see what it looks like, how it wears. I would imagine it wears very similar to the Rolex Datejust in 41mm, so that's the exciting release for me, or the exciting out of the bunch for me personally. The more interesting part than the release itself is actually the way they did this release. So it was all online, and the watch is supposedly going to be available very quickly. So it's not like they're announcing, oh yeah, the watches will be available in 3 months down the road. Some people already can score them at the ADs depending on your relationship. Now, availability, good luck with that. I mean, forever on a waiting list. That's the story of Rolex collector life. And the last thing I want to talk about is the gray market and what this release will do to the gray market. So I already touched on it briefly. I think all the discontinued models, especially Hulk, are really going to shoot up in price in a short-term period. Probably going to be really high until resellers and gray market dealers really find that sweet spot where the demand meets the supply. So if you've been looking for a Hulk, good luck, and sorry about that. Now, as far as the gray market for Rolex watches, the sports models in Oyster Steel goes, it's very surprising because it actually has recovered, and in some cases it's now higher than where it was back in February. I made a video when this whole pandemic was just getting started, and I was talking about how you shouldn't buy a gray market Rolex because the prices are very likely to drop. We're headed for recession. That was before the recession actually hit. And the unemployment is going to go up and all these different things. And all of that did happen. I mean, the market did kind of crash, the stock market. The unemployment rates are sky high. I'm in Canada, and in Canada the unemployment rate is quite high. In the United States, the same story. So what gives? Why are people buying Rolex watches? Don't they want to save money? Didn't they lose jobs? What's happening? There are a few things that are happening, and it's kind of a similar story with a stock market right now. Again, I'm not an expert on any of this. I'm just a guy with a cute dog, a camera, and evidently a lot of free time. But it seems to me that, first of all, rich people need to park their money somewhere, because they do. You don't want to keep your money in cash because of the inflation. We printed so much money to stimulate the economy. And again, I'm not taking any stance here pro or against it. I think it was a necessary thing to do. But because that happened, the money is going to lose its value. Now, how high the inflation rate is going to be, still unknown. Some people are saying up to like 5%, 6%, which is quite a bit. So if you have a lot of cash, of course you want to invest it into something. That's why stock market has gone up, and that's why a lot of luxury items have also gone up in price. Did you know that Ferrari stock is at all-time high? Which doesn't make sense. You can't even really buy a Ferrari anymore. There's waiting lists for these cars. Even in Formula One, they're doing so bad, but the company value is highest it's ever been because of that brand, because rich people know Ferrari and they're buying it because it's kind of a safe investment. It's somewhere to put your money. And I think the same thing is happening with watches. A lot of people just kind of parking their money because they don't have anywhere else to put their money. The second reason why Rolex prices have gone up slightly, and this one is a lesser reason, but still a reason. Rolex has shut down their factory because of pandemic for a little while, so the supply has dropped. The ADs are not getting as much inventory anymore, and even after they reopened, still the release schedule and how ADs are getting inventory. I talked to a few ADs. It's really sporadic. They don't know when they're gonna get it, how much they're gonna get, and also they're not even getting that many watches in. They're talking about how they don't even get enough watches like Datejust, and the watches that you can always buy now are becoming harder to find. So taking these two factors into account, gray market prices have gone up. So what's going to happen with the gray market prices in the future? I don't want to make any more predictions. I don't want anyone to rely on my opinion. But for me personally, I'm not going out there to buy a gray market Rolex. I think the prices are overinflated and they will have to eventually correct. Now, whether it's going to happen this year, next year, or in 5 years from now, who knows? but I think right now it's just a little bit too high for these watches. You know, some watches are selling like double of the retail, which doesn't make any sense. If I were to buy one at the retail price at the ADs and one of the stainless steel sports models, then of course, yeah, it makes a great investment. At least you're not going to lose the money. Even if you don't sell it for double, or if you don't make any money, given enough time, you're not going to lose the money. These watches hold their value really well, and that's kind of the value proposition of Rolex, and that's why a lot of people park their money in Rolex. That will do for this video. Enough talking about Rolex. I appreciate you watching this video until the end. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We release new videos every week. And leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about the new Rolex 2020 releases. Are you upset about 41mm Submariner? Are you excited about the Oyster Perpetual in 41mm? Leave all those thoughts below. I always enjoy reading your comments. By the way, today on my wrist, I'm wearing the Zelos Nova dress watch. I did a full review of this watch. That video can be found on the YouTube channel. I will also leave it linked in the description below. Also in the description below, there are a couple of other links. The first link is a secret link. Have a look if you're curious. The second link is a link to bondnatostraps.com. If you're looking for a great quality NATO strap and want to support this YouTube channel at the same time, buying one of these NATO straps is a great way to do so. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. You wanna join me? Bond, you wanna join me? People always demand to see you. Come here. Come here. Good boy. Good boy. People would get mad at me if you're not in the video. You know that.